office. C-SPAN, your primary source for Campaign 2018.
Welcome to the Idaho Debates, a look at the candidates on the general election ballot for governor. The Idaho Debates are a collaborative effort among the Idaho Press Club, Boise State University's School of Public Service, University of Idaho's McClure Center, Idaho State University's Department of Political Science, the League of Women Voters Voter Education Fund, and Idaho Public Television. Funding for the Idaho Debates is provided by the Friends of Idaho Public Television and the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
Hello and welcome to the Idaho Debates on Idaho Public Television. Tonight, the candidates vying to be your governor of the state of Idaho will take the stage to ask for your vote. I want to welcome the candidates, Democratic challenger Representative Paulette Jordan and Republican nominee Lieutenant Governor Brad Little, who will introduce themselves in just a minute. Asking them questions tonight will be reporters selected by the Idaho Press Club, Cynthia Sewell of the Idaho Statesman, Morgan Boydston of KTVB Channel 7, and Betsy Russell of the Idaho Press. I'm Melissa Davlin, host of Idaho Reports here on Idaho Public Television. I'm moderating tonight's debate and will do my best to make sure both candidates get equal time and stay on point. To help me and to remind the candidates how long they've been talking is a volunteer timekeeper from the League of Women Voters, Eleanor Chahy. We've asked the candidates to engage each other on the issues. In other words, less emphasis on a rigid format and more focus on an intelligent discussion that helps you, the voter, cast a more informed ballot. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds for opening comments and 90 seconds for close. We flipped a coin a few minutes ago, and Lieutenant Governor Little will begin with his opening remarks.
Well, thank you. Thank the reporters, thank the League of Women Voters, particularly thank my family for being here. I'm Brad Little. We live in Emmett in Jim County, lifelong ranchers. My wife's here with me today. Our sons that were born and raised in Emmett went to Idaho Public Schools and Idaho higher education institutions. We were very fortunate that they left Idaho for a while, but came back and married two incredible daughter-in-laws, and now we've got 5 grandkids, and that's very important to Teresa and I. All my life as a rancher, I was selected to leadership, whether it was in agriculture, business, education, or philanthropy. Over and over, I've had an opportunity to be all around the state, to see what issues are important to people in the state, to learn about Idaho, to know what's critical, what's on the minds. As lieutenant governor and as state senator, I've learned more of it from the government side. I am proud of the fact that Idaho leads the nation in job growth, in economic prosperity, in all the things that are going on, but we have still more work to do. That's why I am asking for your support in this job to be your governor. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Representative Jordan. Your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Melissa. And thanks to our League of Women Voters and our moderators here today. I also want to thank all of our viewers for watching, our listeners and supporters. We're very thankful for everyone as well in our audience this afternoon or this evening. And I want to also thank my family who could not be here tonight, but everyone is very excited for this event tonight. First, I want to say how much of an honor it has been to listen to each and every one of you in every single county in our state, going up and down, north, south, east, and west, and being able to have this privilege to hear your stories. Because like you, I was raised here in Idaho. I was raised in a very rural community, not very privileged. I am not a wealthy millionaire. And in fact, being that I am so directly connected to the hurt, the heartache, the trauma, I know everyone and what our livelihood is about, which is why I'm running for governor. I want to make sure that our promises are kept, that everything that we have heard from here on out, from the recent decades past to this point, are going to be now successes rather than failures. As a governor running for the state of Idaho, gubernatorial candidate, I also want to make sure that everyone's voices, every Idahoan, is put to the forefront rather than sitting at the back door. So it's unfortunate that we are here now, but now we have an opportunity. We have real leadership in this process of selecting our next governor. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity, because it is really up to us to decide for ourselves as a people what is best for our future and our next several generations. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And the first question is from Cynthia Sewell for Lieutenant Governor Little.
Yes, Representative Jordan, Good evening. During the debate last week, you said there is a lack of transparency in state politics. Within the last 2 months, your campaign paid a total of $30,000 to 2 Wyoming companies. One is owned by your campaign manager, who's a California attorney. The other company was recently registered anonymously with the Wyoming Secretary of State, and it has the same address as the federal super PAC that you and your campaign manager advised on. My questions: who owns Roughneck Steering, this newly created anonymous company? Why did you pay it $20,000? And as someone who is campaigning on transparency, why is your campaign associated with such shadowy out-of-state companies?
Well, first of all, thank you, Cynthia, for your great question. I ultimately believe in transparency, and like in the State House, I really walk my talk. I was one who firmly supported that we have more transparency when it comes to financial interest in the money that we take in, which is why every single question that you've asked me, I have given you the information, including my own income taxes. I fully believe in transparency, and it's why I even supported and have asked my treasurer, Senator John Peavy, to represent this campaign, because he is the godfather of the Sunshine Law. And answering your question, which is actually great, I will reply that honestly, everything that we have, all of the reports, the contracts, everything has been above ground, and it's as reported, and it's already been filed. So everyone is allowed to gather that information, just like you have.
Okay, but specifically, my questions were, who owns Roughneck Steering? And these are questions I have asked of you and your staff and campaign and have not been answered. So specifically, I'll repeat again, who owns Roughneck Steering, this newly created company? Why did you pay it $20,000 just a few days after it was created? And why is your campaign associating with these 2 shadowy out-of-state companies that have been registered anonymously with the Wyoming Secretary of State, as opposed to being registered and formed as Idaho companies?
Well, again, thank you, Cynthia, because we did have a very long conversation about this prior to this event. We've submitted a press statement to you, and as many others who have asked this question. So you do have all the facts and figures before you, but you're asking it here again. So same follow-up to you is that these are same contractors for the campaign who are helping with information as we're getting out the vote, which is a simple process, which is what supporters of the campaign are contributing to the campaign for, which is getting more people to the doors, knocking not only on the doors in the communities, but making those phone calls in communities all across Idaho.
Okay, again, my questions were not specifically answered, but they were re-asked. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. It's often said that the way you run is the way you'll govern. You've seen multiple people quit your campaign only to have you turn around and claim they were fired. You've also forced several staffers to sign non-disclosures agreement, and yet again you're running on the idea of transparency. Why should we believe your administration will be transparent when your campaign has not been?
Well, again, thank you, Cynthia, for the question. And again, it is always about transparency, as we have been above ground about every single thing. In fact, many members of the media have come to our campaign and have asked the same questions and been given the same responses. And unlike yourself, you're having a different reaction to the same truth, which is unfortunate. But the fact remains, when we have a growing campaign that has been, really exceedingly grown exponentially here, not only in the state of Idaho, but across the country. A lot of people have volunteered, who are also working, have moved here to our state to work directly for the campaign, to become part of our mass movement. You're going to have some missteps. You're going to have some people where we have multiple folks in many different parts of our state, and it's hard to keep track of every single individual and what they're doing. But in this case, you're going to have someone who you disagree with, and clearly we disagree with this one particular individual and what has happened. So there's going to be growing pains. It's typical for every campaign.
We'll move to Lieutenant Governor Little. Good evening. Idaho consistently receives failing grades when it comes to government accountability and transparency. This past session, the legislature took little action on the recommendations of its own campaign finance task force. As governor, will you address this, and how, specifically?
Well, I've got a long record on that. Matter of fact, some of the sunshine laws in Idaho on elections were laws that I drafted and got passed. I've always been a proponent of it. I think it speaks to the essence of a democratic republic, is that people know where the money comes from, knows who contributes the money, and that's been my position in the past, and that will be my position in the future.
So any legislation that comes across your desk that strengthens campaign finance or government accountability is going to get a signature from you?
Well, I will not commit to every single bill, but if you can look at my record in the past, and you can see that I've been for them. But a governor should be prudent in every legislation they look at to make sure it accomplishes the ultimate goal. And that's my ultimate goal, is more transparency to the citizens of Idaho.
Okay. And a related follow-up question. New lawmakers, particularly female lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, have complained about a good old boys club in Idaho politics. If there is such a thing as a good old boys club, then possibly you've been a long-time member. What will your administration do to break down the barriers consciously or unconsciously set up to keep these people out of the decision-making process?
Well, I have seen within government the strength that comes from a strong team, and the value that women in particular bring is incredibly important. In the appointment process, helping the governor, we always make sure that we cast a wide net, and that everyone that's qualified is there. And most often, in many instances, it's the women candidates who rise to the top. I will tell you that when we have a cabinet meeting in the governor's office, with the exception of the chief of staff, the next 3 highest ranking officials in the governor's office today are all women.
All right, the next question is from Betsy Russell.
This question is for both candidates. Let's start with you, Representative Jordan. Current Governor Butch Otter has held far fewer press conferences than previous governors, choosing not to make frequent public statements through the news media about what he's doing as governor. How would you deal with the press as governor? Would you be like Governor Otter or more like previous Idaho governors?
Thank you for the wonderful question, Betsy. And it actually goes to show that we have lacked in transparency, which is also why our state has been given an F rating. It's unfortunate. The Little Otter administration has failed the public good of Idaho. Once I'm governor, I will fully show what transparency is about. I'm going to protect the integrity of the media. And, you know, unlike our current institution, they have really failed Idahoans when it comes to having this direct connection. We are already doing that as is. We have town halls on a frequent basis. We have constant meetings on a daily with local individuals from the public media. And on top of that, we have meetings upon meetings all over every single county. We are meeting with mayors and local city council members, ensuring that local governing authorities have a direct relationship to their future governor. I value that, and I find that to be extremely important. So again, once I'm governor, we will make sure that everyone has access to the governor's office and to the state house, as should be.
Lieutenant Governor Little.
Well, the 4 of you know how accessible I've been in the Senate as Lieutenant Governor, and then my campaign. My campaign speaks for itself as far as transparency and openness, as far as being open to the press. It's the essence of a democratic republic, that the people, through whatever means, and the press is one of the most important ones, have access to how governments run. Transparency is literally the mother's milk of a successful, in the fact that there would be confidence of the people in what decisions are being made by their government.
I find it interesting that our current Lieutenant Governor says this because he has refused, in fact, to talk to the media, not only at the local but the national. So it's odd that you're saying this about transparency if you even refuse to answer a question. People don't have yet to understand where you stand on even Medicaid expansion.
Name one local Idaho media source that I haven't talked to. Now, some of the national ones, perhaps. I'm not running for President of the United States. Right. I'm not running for Governor of California.
Media
I'm
is
running
media.
for the. I'm running for Governor of the state of Idaho.
We have yet to know where you stand on multiple issues, so I'm just curious when you say that transparency, when people have no idea where you stand.
And we will definitely get to many of those issues tonight. The next question on one of those issues is from Morgan Boydston for Lieutenant Governor Little.
All right, I'm starting with you. So in a recent debate, you said whether you've been here for 7 months, you're still an Idahoan, but a lot of those Idahoans are being deported. ICE has increased immigration holds and deportation since the Trump administration took over, and it's been ripping Idaho families apart and affecting a lot of our agricultural sectors and dairy industry. Just this weekend, I don't know if you read the article, the New York Times did a piece about a man living in St. Anthony who was deported and then died in the California desert trying to return to his family. A very, very disheartening story. Many of our law enforcement agencies have entered into agreements with the federal government to carry out these policies. Do you agree with the Trump administration's tactics?
I have been abundantly clear that we have to have comprehensive immigration reform, and the issue of the negative atmosphere for people that have been here, the dreamers, and of course work permits that we have, that I utilized when I was in the industry. We have to have that solved. We did it once in the 80s. We need to do it now. We need to address that problem so that those people don't have to live in the shadows. We obviously have to have border security. But with that border security, we need to have a program that exists for people to come here and to come here safely to where they don't have to be in the shadows. And I've been an advocate for good, strong immigration, comprehensive immigration reform.
In terms of Trump's policies and tactics in particular, though, what do you align with or maybe disagree with?
Well, I believe that some of the issues have actually gotten better, that some of the vetting. But we have had people, and this is a terrible circumstance, there have been people trying to get into this country without documentation for years that have suffered what happened to that gentleman from St. Anthony. That's why we need a pathway for them to be here legally so they don't have to live in the shadows.
Lieutenant Governor Little, during the primary, you accused primary opponent Raul Labrador of being soft on illegal immigration. It was inflammatory rhetoric that you said on Idaho Reports was just part of the primary game. That's part of the campaigning game. How is that not at odds with what you're saying right now?
During the primary, I pointed out that when my opponent was in the legislature, there was a bill to define what state programs would be available for undocumented aliens. And he supported that program, and that's what I pointed out in the primary.
And in the situation we saw with the Lunas family in St. Anthony, should any Idahoan be separated from their children?
The children were American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And I frankly didn't get to the end of the story. I read enough of it that I was very saddened by it. But the children were American citizens. The question is, what do you do about those instances where people have been here, their spouse and their children are Americans, and we need a program. Congress has talked time and time again about it, and they've even got up next to the edge a couple times about coming to a resolution of it. They haven't got that done. I'm an advocate that they get that done.
And in Idaho, very big dairy sector, and the Dairymen's Association has spoken out in regards to this. How should Idaho dairies fill positions that those individuals coming from those Hispanic countries are filling if we don't have those immigrants?
That's why they need a program. That's what I've advocated for. They need a program to where these people are here, they're not living in the shadows. The program that exists in the sheep industry, which myself and John Peavy are very familiar with, is a program where they come here, we take care of all their insurance, we take care of their transportation, they don't have to live in the shadows, and I've advised my friends in the dairy industry that I will do all I can to help them with Congress to get a program like that available.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to Representative Jordan, would you support cities in Idaho establishing sanctuary policies?
I think what's more important to understand is that, yes, to answer your question very directly, I do. And it's unfortunate that people do not understand what goes behind sanctuary cities. It is, in fact, the removal of the federal agencies and more local control, which I prefer. I'd like us to move against more so favorably towards state sovereignty and, in fact, run our own state for the better as we know best. So local law enforcement, they would do better with local leadership supporting them versus us being run by the federal government and run by these federal agencies, doing less for our people and doing more damage than good.
Okay, would you take ICE out of the state of Idaho then?
No, because ICE does a good job and they actually represent a particular position and protections. But there needs to be a responsible solution in terms of local leadership working with local law enforcement to do their job properly and correctly. And on top of that, for there to be a continuation in terms of cultural respect. There needs to be understanding between our communities, and right now there's disengagement. And when there's this broad gap in how we treat our people of color in this state, then you're going to see more problems, more harm. And right now we are separating families, and it's unfortunate that our Lieutenant Governor has yet to understand that when it comes to immigration reform, we have reform that needs to happen here at home as well. And we have young children that I have met even in places like Jerome County where families are being separated. And it's despicable, and honestly, Lieutenant Governor, it's unconscionable that you would allow this to happen under your leadership. This is why I'm running for governor, because I'm here to protect every single citizen and every single farm worker who does a lot of good for our industries.
So I don't know if you had the chance to read that New York Times article, but it's similar to many other stories we hear across the nation of individuals who have lived here for decades.
Yes.
While they weren't native born, they've lived here most of their lives. They don't recall their homeland. In that situation where this individual was deported after a routine ICE meeting, would you have allowed him to stay if you were governor?
Yes, they're working hard, they're contributing as a taxpayer, and people don't understand that they are paying taxes. They are hardworking individuals and they contribute to our economy. If we take away all of our workers, and many of them 40% of the farm working industry, we will hurt, we will suffer, and of course we'll see those impacts when it comes to our stores, when it comes to our food contribution. So let's make sure that we're responsible towards those people who are wanting to be not only hard-working individuals in our community, but these are folks who abide by the law. They're not breaking any laws. I do not hear of people, especially our young DACA students, who were attacking at this very instance where our current Little Otter administration is utilizing taxpayer resources to attack young DACA students. We can do better.
Lieutenant Governor Little, would you like to respond to that?
I don't know what she just said, but I know that in my Constitution it says that the borders of America and immigration are the sole authority of the federal government, and that's my position, is that immigration is the sole authority of the federal government. That's why I'm so adamant that we need comprehensive immigration reform to take away this uncertainty, so we don't have these tragedies like the one that's alluded to in the New York Times today.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on. The next question is from Betsy Russell.
Lieutenant Governor Little, a big part of a governor's success is who they surround themselves with. Who do you have in mind? Who will be your chief of staff, your office attorney, your heads of the departments of health and welfare, corrections, commerce, labor?
I have made it a position to everyone that I am working diligently to the first Tuesday in November. Obviously, I've had experience with all those agencies. I know all the agency directors. In fact, I vetted quite a few of those candidates. But I don't think it's incumbent upon any candidate to go out and make promises to people that they will be in their agency. There needs to be an election first before whoever is victorious in the election starts making the determination about who will be in their staff, and I have made zero commitments to anyone.
But it sounds like you're saying you would consider keeping on those agency heads, those advisors who you helped vet and put in place during the Clinton
I did not
administration.
say that, Betsy. I said I vetted some of them. I didn't say I would keep them on. But some of them will obviously stay. We've got lots of great agency directors. We've got lots of great board members. But I'm not committing to anyone, and I've told everybody that asks that question that there were no promises made until after Election Day, if I'm fortunate enough to get the support of the voters of Idaho.
The legislature hasn't always followed along with Governor Otter's goals and priorities, from health care and transportation proposals to specific tax policies. Assuming that the ideological makeup of the legislature is the same next year, how will you work with them to achieve your priorities?
Well, my experience, whether it be outside of the legislature in leadership in business and agriculture and philanthropy and education, my experience in leadership, I was selected in leadership the second year I was in the Idaho legislature, or my position as president of the Senate and working with both the minority party and the majority party, I think gives me a pretty good opportunity to know what's important. Those legislators that you have to work with, not only do you need to know the legislatures, you need to know what's critical in their communities, in their districts, what's important to them. By valuing what's important to those legislators and working with them, that's how you get things done, and I have a pretty good track record on that.
Representative Jordan, let's talk about what your administration would look like. Yes. Who do you have in mind? Who will be your chief of staff, your office attorney, your heads of major departments like health and welfare, corrections, commerce, labor?
Thank you, Betsy. In fact, I have some of the greatest advisors as is already. In fact, one of my healthcare advisors right now used to advise the Air Force in the Pentagon. He advised many generals across this nation who are doing great work, cutting edge, and I really appreciate his voice and how he is helping me build a healthcare program into the future. In fact, Idaho can serve as a leader in this regard and become the model in terms of how we reconstruct healthcare for the entire nation. So we're looking ahead. We're not looking to be followers and saying, let's do what the feds say. We're actually looking to say, we're going to stand in front and build a model that no one else is willing to do. And because we're walking our talk as is, not taking money from corporations, we're not being bought out by health insurance companies, we're actually proving that we are here for the people, so we're going to deconstruct our current system to build it up for the better. This is going to go for every other administrative program in our state. I want to bring the best and the brightest to Idaho, and we're already halfway there. So I'm actually very excited, Betsy, to tell you that when it comes down to who we're bringing into our state, many people across the country who have been part of even presidential administrations want to come and help us here in our state because they know that we can become the leader in this country, just here in Idaho.
So are you saying you would turn to people from out of state to staff your administration?
If that's where the best and the brightest come from, I want to make sure that we bring in the best when it comes to building up the best model here in our state. But there are a lot of people here in Idaho that are already part of our own bench, and I want to make sure that we are also propping up our own. But this is also why we have to improve education. We have to improve our economy in so many ways and keep our best and brightest in our state.
Are you prepared to work with the lieutenant governor who might be from the other party?
Absolutely. Any lieutenant governor who makes it, although I will tell you, I have a great partner in the running, Lieutenant Governor Kristen Collum, who would be fabulous for our state because she has served our country as is prior to running. She's a military veteran and she has a great experience in the tech sector, so she would really help us, and if we partnered in together, we would be a great duo for not only the state of Idaho, but for the country.
Lieutenant Governor Little, same question. Are you prepared to work with a lieutenant governor who might be from the other party?
I've got vast experience working with both parties, as I alluded to, whether it was before I was in the legislature, in leadership all over the state, or when I served in leadership in the legislature and I served as lieutenant governor. You can ask any one of the minority party how they were treated when they came into my door or when I was standing presiding over the Senate.
So would that also go for, say, a superintendent of public instruction from another party?
For whoever the people of Idaho elect, I will work with.
Representative Jordan, same question. All right. Next question is from Cynthia.
Same question?
Yes.
Yes, and thank you for the great question, Betsy. People should know we have some great candidates in the Democratic ticket, and I will tell you that Cindy Wilson, who is the candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction, she is an educator, and she has already spoken of innovations that we need here in Idaho. So I will tell you that in loyalty to our partnership, granted our Lieutenant Governor here is stating, whoever picks these candidates, I'm going to firmly state that I know who our great candidates are, and I would love to see Cindy Wilson become our next superintendent. But if that is not the case, yes, we have proven leadership that I have been able to work on both sides of the aisle, but I do hope that our listeners watching will really take a look at Cindy Wilson. She's a great candidate.
All right. Thank you so much, Representative Jordan. The next question is from Cynthia for you on education.
So this year, Idaho is spending $2.3 billion on education, about 63% of its general fund spending. Of that amount, $1.8 billion, or roughly 50%, is going to K through 12. Representative Jordan, you have said the state can do better, much better, when it comes to education. Yes. With nearly half of the state's general fund budget going to K-12 education, how will you increase spending? By giving education a larger piece of the budget pie, or by increasing the size of the pie by raising revenue and taxes?
Thank you, Cindy. This is the perfect question. I'm going to tell you that one of the issues that I've seen, Cynthia, when it comes down to public education expenditures, is that we're already looking at the waste of our taxpayer resources as is. We have yet to get to smart investments, and when we're looking at how we're going to save our money, we're already wasting it when it comes to sending our money out of state into private prison contracts or going after legal cases. And unfortunately, we have yet to even have a smart leadership who are in place with our current administration who has found a way to save taxpayers' money when it comes to health care. We would save, in fact, if we switched over to a self-insured health care plan, hundreds of millions of dollars. On top of that, if we expand Medicaid, which the current administration refuses to do, we would save not only $600 million within the next 10 years, but we would save $400 million within the first year. $400 million that would come to the state of Idaho to go into investing into our local communities, investing into public education, our teachers, and innovative programs that would really help our kids get that edge up so that they can compete. So it really doesn't come down to how we're going to cut here and cut there, but how we're going to bring more resources to our state. And yes, we do need to invest more into our public schools, more into our public teachers, but that is all about making sure that we stop wasteful spending and ensuring that we make smarter investments from here on out.
Would you also consider how education is funded, possibly changing the revenue source or the revenue stream into how education is funded through the tax structure?
You know, a lot of people don't understand that oftentimes even the budget itself, which is very meager, and it, again, unfortunate because it disserves the public good. But when you have a meager budget in the forefront and you get to that at the very end of a legislative session, you often are looking at how we're prioritizing everything else. We've created corporate welfare here in the state of Idaho. And when we're giving away taxpayers' monies to the very wealthy, privileged few and corporations in our state, the big box stores, we have to look at how we're going to derail and decurtail those tax incentives for the Walmarts, the big box stores, again, because we need to ensure that that money is placed properly back into the public good, making sure that we're investing in not only rural transportation and education, but in our rural health care, ensuring that we spread our resources far and wide, and so it's not concentrated in specific people's hands. And that's what really we're after. And when we have an opportunity to serve as governor, we will show the people what it truly means to have responsible management. But it's going to come down to also looking internally, because we want to make sure that we're not investing into corporate banks on Wall Street, or that we're not giving our money away to these other private prison contracts. Okay. We can save our state internally by ensuring that we have a state independent bank where we can self-fund, and ensuring that we're helping local businesses and building up our own economy.
Lieutenant Governor, how do you respond to that? Education revenues, education spending?
This is one of the things I'm most passionate about, Cynthia, is our core responsibility of a state, where right now we, as you write, you're correct that we spend half of our general fund on education. In fact, Idaho, as a percent of the general fund, has one of the highest percents general fund that we put in the education funding formula. In the last 4 years, we've added over $400 million, and we did it the hard way. We grew, we didn't raise taxes, we grew the budget and made a solid commitment to fund education, primarily going into teacher pay. We lead the nation in the increase in salary for teachers. We've still got work to do, and I have a plan to do that. 32% has been the increase that we put into the school funding formula. There are other things that we're doing in education. Advanced opportunities, increases in STEM education, what we're doing in mastery, what we're doing in math and science scores. The fundamental responsibility of the state to educate our kids, besides being a constitution, it's our moral obligation. If we want Idaho to continue to thrive like it is today, we have to continue to put money into education, we have to invest it smartly, and we have to do it collectively, where we get everybody on board. Parents, teachers, the legislature, the business community. That's what we have today, and that's what we'll do if I'm your governor.
Representative Jordan, you wanted to respond briefly?
Yes, thank you. I have actually heard the Lieutenant Governor mention this in the last debate when it comes to the rate of increase. I mean, and this is pretty much like the best award for our most improved for Idaho. Good job. Because really we have fallen behind over the last many years, including the last decade that you've been in charge. And it's unfortunate because Idahoans are suffering on a daily basis. And when it comes to education, we've been last. I know you have not read those studies and reports, but you look at even rural parts of our state, and half of our kids are not going on to college. Many are dropping out. And in fact, many schools, 33 of 87, have opened on the first day of school without any educator or any staff within that classroom. And this is under your watch. This is unfortunate, but again, the rate of increase, very poor, because you're just saying that we're trying to keep up with everyone else, but we're still 50th in the country. We're still last.
We are not 50th in the country. That is categorically, undeniably incorrect, and I ask my friends in the media to fact check it.
But in many instances, we are pretty darn close to last. And both of you say, you know, We spend a certain percentage on the general fund, more than half of our general fund on education, but we still have different things.
That's not what I said. I said as a percent of our general fund that we put into education, we're one of the highest states.
But it's also true that we spend half of our general fund on education. That is also true.
We spend 62.8% on education, but on public education, Idaho makes one of the deepest commitments in how much of our general fund we put into it.
Right. So all of that said, one of the things that you spearheaded was Go Lead Idaho, or I'm sorry, Go On.
That's
for
right.
Idaho graduates. We're nowhere near the 60% goal that was set for that commission.
You are right, but you can't just snap your fingers and have all these kids going on to college. You have to invest in early childhood. We got to get these kids reading proficiently at the end of the 3rd grade, and I have a plan to do this. We got to give them career counseling so that some of the kids that go on to college, which those are, a lot of them are on an automatic basis, but we've got a lot of kids we got to put into career technical. We've got a plan on career technical. That's how you get to that 60% goal, and I have a plan to do that.
We have another education question for you from Betsy
Good.
Russell.
Lieutenant Governor Little, you mentioned early childhood education. Close to half of Idaho's children are entering kindergarten without the skills they need to learn to read. According to a recent statewide poll, 76% of Idaho voters support the state investing in preschool opportunities for children ages 3 to 5 years old. But Idaho is one of 6 states that does not do this. Should that change? And if so, how?
I have a plan. You can go to my website, bradlittleForIdaho.com, and see what my plan is. My plan is to give, let the state put some resources together, summer reading programs, busing to kindergarten. Part of the problem is there's not even money to bus these kids into kindergarten. Full day kindergarten, reading coaches, changing the number of teachers in the classroom in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. And part of my plan says some of these school districts, if they want to, as we have in Caldwell and Basin School District right up here, can have a pre-K program. My plan is doable. I can get my plan through the legislature. I've talked to the legislative leadership about it, and that will be a high priority for me.
And how would it be funded?
You fund it the same way we've been doing the rest of education. You do it through growth in our economy. You don't raise taxes, and you take that growth that we're capturing, because we're the fastest growing state in incomes, we're the fastest growing state in jobs, and that's how we put the last $420 million in additional funds into education.
Representative Jordan, you have called for universal preschool in Idaho.
Can I actually respond to the...
Go ahead.
Thank you, Betsy. I want to say that, even though I just want to make sure that our viewers are not continuing to be misled, because you've had 9 years to make any kind of difference whatsoever, but you continue to fail our public good. And in fact, it's too little too late when it comes to your plan that we're speaking of. Now, when it comes to this plan, I'm wondering, why has this not been done before? Why have you not taken any action? My kids could have benefited, in fact, if that were the case, but it's taken this long, 9 years.
Lieutenant Governor.
Perhaps you'll get into a position where you'll understand the role between the lieutenant governor and the governor.
No, that's not the case. Well, you have a leadership position. People elected you to be a lieutenant governor. So in any case, I want to make sure that our listeners understand that you have not taken action. So there's a lot of overpromising, which is what we have too much of. In fact, when I grew up in the state, I heard only promises and zero action.
I'm proud of the fact that we lead the nation in increase in funding for school teachers. I'm proud of the fact.
How so? Given to the rest of the country, we're still 50th. We're still last.
We are not 50th. We are not last.
Rate of increase, even though you think that we're trying to get ahead, we may have gotten 2 steps ahead, but we're still at the end of
We are not
everyone in the
last in
nation.
teacher pay. We are not last. We lead every state around us in our ACT scores. What matters is
we're not first. We're not at the top. We're at the very end.
We've got some places that we've got a lot of work to do.
Oh, we have a lot of work to do, but we need new work under a new administration.
And I'm proud of what progress has taken place. There's a reason that the 9,000 school teachers in Idaho are supporting my campaign.
And we will surely fact check these. Betsy has one last question before we move on.
On early childhood education, what is your solution and how would it be funded?
Well, I've actually promoted this well before our lieutenant governor, and I am actually thankful that you're coming along because, however you want to be part of it, that's great. But universal pre-K is really what I promoted since I ran for this office. I promoted this idea for early childhood education because my own 2 cents have benefited from this program. I find it to be the best way for us to build a foundational model for our kids into the future. We are going to invest in this program, and I really appreciate the Idaho Business Education Group supporting this initiative, because they are well ahead as well. Everyone wants to be as innovative in our educational programming as we can be, and this shouldn't be an option that's only available to those who are making the higher percentage of our state. This should be available to everyone regardless of their income. So I'm going to actually fund this system by ensuring that we expand Medicaid to bring the initial $400 million into our state, and of course save our state those tax savings of $600+ million. And then on top of that, we have to open up our state to tourism. We have to get back into energy solutions, and then really drive up our economy at the local level, which is, and in so many ways we can talk about this model, which I've talked about on my website. But really, we have to open our state up to even a state public bank where we can save our state millions in that regard. And that's money that could be invested back into our school system.
All right, we are going to switch topics now. The next question is for Representative Jordan.
Okay. So you're both gun owners and have expressed open support for the Second Amendment. In light of mass shootings in schools, the recent national conversation has surrounded teachers being the first line of defense. Where do you stand on arming teachers?
Thank you for the good question. And I hear this often around the state. As a gun owner, I tell folks that I firmly support the Second Amendment and their rights to autonomy and gun ownership. When it comes to our teachers, however, I know many, and many raised me as a young woman, and they do not want to be armed. They want to focus on educating our children. So let's make sure that they get to do their job to educate our kids, show them the love that they need, and not expect them to be gun owners and security officers within the classroom.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you've made statements historically that lead to somewhat unclear conclusions on exactly where you stand in the gun regulation debate, specifically regarding modern semi-automatic rifles. I'm going to point to two instances in our Democratic primary debate with you and AJ Blukoff. We asked if you believe the AR-15 has a place in Idaho. You responded saying no, it does not have a place in Idaho. But in other instances, such as your September 21st interview with Nate Shellman, in which I was present, you said, when it comes to guns or implementing or banning anything, you don't want to do that. You're fully in support. Your brothers are gun owners. You don't believe anyone has the right to take those away from them. They're AR-15 owners. Where exactly do you stand on Idahoans owning semi-automatic rifles?
Yes, and thank you so much for asking that question, Morgan. In fact, even prior to that debate, I had specifically stated that I do support AR-15s because, again, I'm a gun owner and I support the autonomy of gun owners. And given that my brothers are military veterans and have AR-15s, I'm going to support their right to own them. And when it was asked to me at a town hall forum that was also made very public by local media, I said the same thing, that I will support that gun ownership. During the debate, I will tell you, and I do apologize to those folks, because when the question was asked, I was referring to the question of banning bump stocks. So that was what I was getting to, and it was not in any way assorted to assault rifles. So to make things clear, and thank you for helping me clear this up, but the issue is, yes, I fully support gun autonomy, ensuring that those responsible gun owners have access to the guns that they prefer.
Okay, so you misspoke in that original
Yes, and thank
debate.
you for allowing me to clear that up.
Okay, but you don't believe that people should have permits to purchase bump stocks to make them fully automatic?
Right, we don't need, that's my response was
Right.
to that question,
Okay.
was that we do not need bump stocks in this state,
Okay.
as many of our youth have asked us to consider banning bump stocks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Lieutenant Governor, in the same vein, how do we prevent gun violence should something unfortunately happen in our state? What would you tell those parents of those children who were injured or killed if you supported those semi-automatic
Well,
weapons?
we have, obviously, I alluded to earlier the fact that we've got this constitutional obligation to educate our kids, but more important, we have to keep them safe. And there's a lot of things we're doing at the state right now, and this started about 6 years ago, where we're going through every school, the state. The Division of Building Safety is going out and looking at every school and looking at every possible risk area that exists there. For years, the Division of Building Safety checked for fire, checked for electrical problems. Now, unfortunately, in this modern world, we have another risk that's very important to Idaho parents and to the people of Idaho, and that's that we protect those schools. A lot of that needs to be bedded in technology, to where cameras, to where we can automatically lock the door. There was a time when we had a lot of schools where where you had to go outside to lock the door. Those are some of the things that we need to do in our schools all over the state of Idaho. It's a sad commentary that we have to do this training. As far as arming teachers, there are a few school districts that have done that, but in no way, shape, or form should we force our Idaho teachers if they're uncomfortable with it. If it's in a very remote, small school, and for instance, I know one instance where the teacher is a retired law enforcement officer. If that person wants to do it, that's a good place to start, because some districts do have armed law enforcement officers in their schools. But that's up to the choice of the school district and the people that are in the district.
All right, we are running out of time for this debate. We're going to try and get to a couple more topics. The next question is for Lieutenant Governor Little from Cynthia Sewell.
Lieutenant Governor Little, the current governor has told us that the hardest decision he had to make, and the one he was least prepared for, was deciding if the state should put people to death. He also extended an invitation to all the candidates to tour the facilities where they execute prisoners and to ask him questions about the process. The question for you, did you take him up on this offer? And if so, what was your response? What were your thoughts on it? And how would you make your decision on a state execution?
The governor, he's been very generous, and he was generous in this area. I've been to death row. I've seen the facilities out there. Matter of fact, one time we had a inmate that was sentenced, and the governor was out of state, and he came back so that ultimate appeal wouldn't land on my shoulders, because he felt it was his responsibility, even though I told him I would. The most important thing is that we maintain the dignity of that process. Capital punishment is a very, very grave, serious issue. And if you don't know the gravity of it, when you get this job that we are applying for, that is one of the most serious, soul-searching. It tests your faith, it tests your soul, and it's something that a governor has to do. And I have spent enough time out at the prison, on death row, talking to the professionals out there, that I'm prepared for that.
And then related to that, many states are having trouble obtaining execution drugs. The state of Idaho has said it has not purchased any drugs since the last execution, but also the state has not given any information on how much they have on hand, how the drugs are being stored, or their effectiveness. Would you ask the Department of Correction to disclose this information, and do you feel confident in the state's ability to carry out a lethal injection?
Well, most of these drugs have an expiration date. And this is being litigated all over the United States. The factor of the dates on these pharmaceuticals, and in fact, some states are changing the mix. I don't know what the current time frame is on the pharmaceuticals that are available for the death penalty. But we also don't know what the time frame is on upcoming executions because of the appeals process. So both of those things are unknown as far as what the date is. I believe at this time there are some available pharmaceuticals, but that's all I know.
And Representative Jordan, the same question to you. Did you take the governor up on his offer to tour the death row facilities? And if so, your thoughts on that, and how would you make your decision on a state execution?
I actually did, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And it was under the previous director, Kevin Kemp, and he was a great host who allowed me to meet inmates on death row, those in our maximum prison system, and even our women's prison system. And I had the great opportunity to meet our women to learn more about that structure. I will tell you that it teaches you more about being compassionate in your leadership, because you're understanding where they're coming from. So I appreciate that opportunity, and I would implore that many of our legislators, or those who are running for office, who want to serve our people, take that opportunity to see what it's like to walk in their shoes. I find that to be very important. And the same goes for even those who are on death row and how they are executed. And I find that to be very, very challenging, because it does come down to the dignity of that individual. And it is unfortunate on how we even treat those who come from impoverished communities or people of color. So the challenge there is ensuring that we are trying to do right by everyone, and so I think that the same goes for the way that we continue to process this, which again, for the director of our Department of Corrections, he has a very hard job as well, and then as governor, we will certainly have to deal with who we have there on death row.
All right, I'm going to take the next question. I'm curious, Lieutenant Governor Brad Little, you have billed yourself as a healthcare candidate. You have talked about the complexities of the cost of healthcare, the insurance exchange, and you said that you'll respect the will of the voters when it comes to Medicaid expansion, but you have not said how you personally will vote, even though the governor has control over things like whipping votes from the legislature when it comes to funding, or veto, or letting a law become or letting a bill become law without your signature. So will you tell voters today how you personally will vote on Medicaid expansion?
What's important, and you alluded to it, is the funding. If the will of the people, through their constitutional right, is to implement the Medicaid expansion, the funding for it, how it's implemented. I have committed, I've been upfront, I was upfront early on in the primary, that I will implement the will of the voters and work with the legislature to make sure that it's implemented in the best possible manner. As you well know, every year Medicaid comes up, and there are, last year we expanded Medicaid. We expanded Medicaid for dental provisions.
But you didn't expand eligibility for people who fall into the GAP population. So how do you personally view it? Will you be voting yes on Proposition 2?
We had a proposal last year and a proposal 3 years ago. I supported both those proposals. The proposal we had this year, I preferred. I believe that the flexibility we had with the dual waiver was a better option.
But that's not on the ballot in November.
You're correct.
Proposition 2 is on the ballot.
But I said I will implement it, and that's my position, is I will implement the will of the people.
So you're not going to answer how you personally see Proposition 2?
What's important to the people of Idaho is will the governor implement this law? And I've committed time and time again that I will.
Representative Jordan.
Again, going clearly back to lack of transparency. The other thing is he says that the administration, the current Little Otter administration, presented a plan. That plan was denied by the Trump administration, failed by the Trump administration. But what he has yet to also realize is that this does not come down to the federal government making decisions for us. We as leaders, when I am elected, will be that decision maker as a leader for our state, which is very necessary, and what people are asking for is going to be the decision making on how we're going to expand Medicaid to not only help our people who are caught in the gap, but to ensure that we are responsibly looking out for our economy. There are many hospitals in this state who need us to expand Medicaid, many who are hanging by a thread.
Other states similar to Idaho have expanded Medicaid and have seen more than twice what they had estimated initially enroll in the program once the eligibility expanded. Is Idaho ready for that?
Absolutely. And in fact, when we expand, we have, again, the $600 million that we'll save and the $400 plus that will come back immediately. On top of that, what I'm very concerned of, and which our lieutenant governor has yet to allude to, is the fact that we have 20 Republican attorney generals who are attacking the ACA and one specific clause which attacks the pre-existing condition. Once that is underwritten, if it passes through the Supreme Court, if that passes, we have nearly 50% of Idahoans who will be impacted by this clause and who will have underwritings of their pre-existing conditions, and they will lose that access to coverage.
Lieutenant Governor Little, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. The challenge is to the Affordable Care Act. The challenge from it's a Texas Attorney General is if that is successful. And remember, we have the Affordable Care Act, we have Obamacare because of the fact that Justice Roberts said it was a tax. The tax is gone. I think there's a big risk. What I want is an Idaho solution. In Idaho, we have our own exchange. There was a lot of criticism of the fact that Idaho put that exchange in. That was an Idaho solution. I want an Idaho solution to the health care plan. I don't want to just default to the federal government, which is what we will do if we didn't have our own exchange, and what we'll do if we don't have our own health care plans. Those plans And we're still in negotiation with the administration. In fact, there's about 10 or 15 other states that would love to see our plans implemented, because the critical component is there are way more people in Idaho that have been priced out of insurance than there are that are left in the gap. It's somewhere north of 150,000 people that have dropped their insurance.
All right, we have about 20 seconds until closing comments.
Well, what our current Lieutenant Governor has left out is this truth, which is that under Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, the state has had an increase of 100%. When it comes to the state health exchange, our insurance has been overpriced, and our taxpayers have been overtaxed to 246%.
And I am going to have to cut you off there. It is time for closing remarks, and Lieutenant Governor Little, you're up first.
Thank you. Well, panelists, guests, Idaho Public TV, thank you very much. And Representative Jordan, thank you for this. This is very important to the voters of Idaho, to where when we have an open seat, that there's a very healthy dialogue about what's important to the state of Idaho. I have told people over and over in this job, and I want to repeat it one more time. As I look at this job, where I've been in my life, what I've done in leadership roles, I look at this job, every decision that goes across the governor's desk. You've heard about them all here this evening, that every decision I will go through one filter, and that's how do we create the best possible opportunity for our children, our grandchildren, ourselves to be successful here in the state of Idaho. First, they have to have a good job. We've got the fastest growing jobs of any state in the union, and we've got more to do. Second, and perhaps even more important, they want to have a good education system. They need to be college ready and career ready right after they get out of school. But to keep our best kids here, they want to know that we've got a great K-12 system for them to thrive here in Idaho. Third, we need affordable health care. We have got to get our arms around the negative consequences that have happened because of the Affordable Care Act, and I will do that. And finally, we need to protect our quality of life. If we want our kids to stay here, to be here to thrive, they want to know that we're going to protect the Idaho that we've had forever and that we make it better. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Representative Jordan.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank our League of Women Voters for hosting this event. You as well, Melissa Davlin, for doing a wonderful job. And of course, our moderators, thank you all. Wonderful questions. Also to our listeners, thank you for your support, your participatory government, and of course, those who are at the local level who are strongly in favor of local control. I want to say how thankful and humble I am just to have the opportunity to go across the state, to be in your homes and in your communities, and just simply have these conversations that are heart to heart and very impactful on not only myself but my team, because we're building strategies and solutions as we're moving forward and building up this vision for the next 4 years. So I want to say how much of an honor it is, because as someone who has been raised here in our state, raised by my elders and those in my community, it is vastly important that we continue to protect our traditional values and ensure that all of our resources are brought back to our communities. So for me, it's time to end the lies, end the rhetoric, and the empty promises, and ensure that the people's voice are put back at the forefront. Let's end our corporate welfare. Let's make sure that we close these tax loopholes, and then get honestly back to protecting our public lands. If there's federal land that's available to buy, let's buy that land back. As those like me who hunt and fish, we want to protect our rights into perpetuity. My children, my 2 sons, and our future generations are counting on us, each and every one of us as Idahoans, to get out and vote. And let's remind ourselves that this is not a Republican state. This is an independent state, and many of us, like myself, we value our independence. So let's stand firmly on our rights to get out and vote come November 6th. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for tonight. We'll see you at the polls.